Hello, this is Bryant Myers, and welcome to another episode of Debunking Flat Earth. Tonight I got a really good one for you. We're going to talk about the Coriolis effect and how it applies to things like storm systems, ballistics, and airplanes, and that it is a very real thing, contrary to what flat earthers say. And we're back to Witsit tonight, so we're going to start with a little video clip from Witsit, and we're going to see what he has to say about Neil deGrasse Tyson, and then I want to play a little video clip from Neil, because this will kind of set the stage. It's really good stuff. So check it out.
Prominent people, even Neil deGrasse Tyson, which I know you say you don't agree with everything he says, but he said that actually this guy kicked a field goal and won the football game because the earth spun underneath the football as it was north to south.
So that's Witsit sort of quoting Neil deGrasse Tyson saying that this field goal kick, the earth basically rotated out from under it. But let's see, did Neil say that though, Witsit? Let's hear directly from Neil exactly what you're referring to.
You're trying to make a 50-yard field goal, that's far away enough. And the ball is airborne long enough for the rotation of the earth to deflect it to the right by a third of an inch. Cincinnati Bengals against, I forgot who, was it Seattle Seahawks? In overtime, sudden death kick, and the kick went up and everybody's heart stops and no one breathes, and there it tumbles, and it hit the left upright and went in for the win, but kind of barely went in. And then I tweeted, I said this game was won assisted by the rotation of the earth. And that force that makes it happen is the same force that sends hurricanes rotating counterclockwise in the northern hemisphere and clockwise in the southern hemisphere.
Okay, so you can very clearly hear that Neil did not say the earth rotated out from under the football. This is a very common misunderstanding from flat earthers that if you apply their logic, we can jump up in the air and the wall would hit us at 1,000 miles an hour if we're at the equator. Of course that doesn't happen because conservation of momentum is a thing. Inertia is a thing. So when that field goal was kicked, Neil correctly said that the rotation of the earth deflected it. Again, we'll get into non-inertial reference frames here in a second. But the point is Neil did not say that the earth rotated out from under it. And again, flat earthers, I heard not just Witsit, but it's almost a universal misunderstanding with flat earthers. And they think it's some kind of proof when they apply it to the spinning earth and how fast it goes. They just don't understand that there's conservation of momentum and inertia, that when you jump up in the air, you're traveling the same speed as the earth. So when you come back down again, you're not going to be going backwards or sideways based on the rotation of the earth. But I wanted to play one more clip because this really is just kind of cool. And I've done the calculations on this exact field goal kick. So that's why I wanted to show you the actual kick so you can kind of have a really good context for what Neil was talking about.
Good snap, good hold. It is good as he banks it in. And the Bengals are 5-0. Under the direction of Darren Simmons.
Isn't that amazing? It's an overtime win, just a matter of inches. I mean, now whether or not the Coriolis effect had an influence there is hard to say, but certainly it could have only helped. And actually, I did the calculation here, one of my little whiteboards here you can see. And so basically, we're going to get into this a little bit more with the ballistics on the deflection angle. But just take it for now that this is kind of a formula based on the Coriolis effect or the Coriolis force to how much something that's airborne will be horizontally deflected. And it's basically W here is just the Earth's angular speed. This is the range of the target and the time of flight. And you take the sine of the latitude, which is 39 degrees for Cincinnati. So when you do the numbers here and you apply a 42-yard field goal is going to be 1,512 inches. The time of flight was 2 seconds, and I actually went through the frame by frame, and it was like 2.01. I mean, it was almost exactly 2 seconds from the time when it just left his foot to when it hit that upright. I could just right at 2 minutes exactly, almost. So you put these numbers in with the latitude, and you find and you get 0.138 inches. And that's 3.51 millimeters. And my friend over at flatearth.ws, he did the similar thing. And this was kind of cool because I was pretty confident that my numbers were right. But he did the calculation totally independent of me. And I'm not even sure he used the same equation. But he got 3.5 millimeters as well. Isn't science wonderful that I got a great, and you can see it right here. over in the bottom. And notice that he also did a few other calculations with tennis and soccer and golf. But still, this is 3.51 millimeters. What is that? So that field goal kick. Now, Neil deGrasse, I think he didn't do the calculations right, although my friend at FlatEarth.ws, me and him got the same number, so I'm pretty sure we both did it right. But I don't know that Neil was really trying to be accurate. He said 1/3 of an inch. It's more 1/8 of an inch, but he's not too far off. We'll give him the benefit of the doubt there. But even if it was 1/3 of an inch, I mean, could that have affected that field goal? I mean, very possibly. And again, it's not to say that there's not wind speed and other factors going on, but regardless of what other vectors are acting on the football with your free body diagram, having it, and it will deflect it to the right, having that extra Coriolis force could only have helped the kick to go through. So let's kind of look at Coriolis here. And it's a force that's based on non-inertial reference frames and rotation. So I want to play this little animation here because it's a nice little depiction of the Coriolis force.
All points closer to the center, say like someone in Greenland, will be spinning slower when compared to points spinning further away from it, say like people in Brazil, closer to the equator. So if we look at it all flattened out, we can picture something like this. Arrows at the equator travel faster than arrows at the 45-degree line, like we just observed. Now imagine you're a cloud that formed here on the equator. You'll have the same velocity as the Earth, but then a gust of wind sweeps you to the north, where the Earth isn't spinning as fast. Due to inertia, your speed remains the same. You don't get any faster, but everything around you is literally traveling slower, so you, relative to the ground, move ahead of everything else. If you're a cloud that forms at the 45-degree line, you'll also have the same speed as everything around you, but if you drift down to the equator, you'll be moving slower than the ground underneath you, so you'll fall behind. And the same things for the southern hemisphere. Moving towards the equator always results in falling behind, while moving away results in pushing ahead.
So just to kind of look at it visually here, you can see this image. What's happening is because of these tangential velocities, that everything in the northern hemisphere is rotating to the right. So it turns out the horizontal component, we'll see with the ballistics, there's a vertical component too, but right now we're just looking at the horizontal component. Everything's getting deflected off to the right in the northern hemisphere, and in the southern hemisphere, everything off to the left. And this has to do, again, purely from the rotation of our sphere, our spherical Earth. So it's nothing to do with the Earth rotating out from under you. It is more to do with the fact that we're all part of this rotating non-inertial reference system, because the Earth and the atmosphere are co-rotating together. And this is, again, what flat earthers don't seem to get, is that the Earth is not like rotating out from under the atmosphere. Now, getting to storm systems, this whole idea of rotating to the right in the northern hemisphere and the left in the southern hemisphere, and when you have a low pressure cell, this is where hurricanes are based on these low pressure cells, the air rushes in. It rushes in a way where it causes a counterclockwise rotation in the northern hemisphere and a clockwise rotation in the southern hemisphere, based on the Coriolis force. So these are very real forces, and even though we'll see the ballistics and the airplane adjustments are very small and very subtle, these large storm systems cover such large distances that they have very much more profound effects. So we can see the Coriolis force much more significantly in hurricanes. And I just want to show you this here. I took these little screen captures off of the GOES 16, and I was basically just about 60 miles north of the eye of the hurricane when Hurricane Ian came through. And again, you can see the counterclockwise rotation here as it's coming onto landfall. Just a tremendous force. So this rotation here is based on the Coriolis force. Okay, so I got a funny little graphic here. I had some fun making this. I'm not a great Photoshop person, but to me the Coriolis flat, it is like a flat Earth kill shot. And the pun here is that I want to talk about ballistics next and how Coriolis is factored into long-range ballistics and even artillery too. But let's hear Witsit talk about this too, because he just is convinced that there is no Coriolis effect in long-range ballistics.
You have bullet spin with bullets itself, like barrel spin, which is much stronger than Coriolis even claims to be. You have to account for wind much stronger than Coriolis even claims to be. I don't care what they say in the book. I've talked to many people that shoot in real life. You don't account for that. You account for the wind. Okay,
so Witsit's an expert, I guess, on artillery here. And what he doesn't realize, as we'll see, is it very much is a part of long-range snipers. But here's the thing. He's not totally incorrect in the sense that in a lot of situations, especially 1,000 yards or less, you don't really have to factor Coriolis because the deflections, even at 1,000 yards, are going to be in the range of maybe 1.5 to 4 inches, depending on your latitude. And the other thing, the Coriolis effect is stronger at the northern latitudes and the far, far southern latitudes because it's the sine of the latitude. And you'll see that at 60 degrees latitude, the sine is 1/2, right? So you really got to get high in latitude for the Coriolis to be very powerful. And if you're shooting anywhere near the equator, it's going to be negligible. But say at 45th latitude, it is significant enough that if you're shooting over 1,000 yards and it's a calm day and your target's not moving, that you want to lock in on your little scope. Some of them have even, as we'll see, Coriolis settings. So it absolutely, in certain situations, can help. Now, I did another little whiteboard here. And so here you can see we got a bullet, and there's a lot of different forces going on here. So again, remember I said before, flat earthers can't seem to draw a free body diagram to save their lives. And Witsit did bring up spin drift and the gyroscopic drift, and that is true. That is one of the things. And typically, the gyroscopic drift goes to the right, as it does the Coriolis in the northern hemisphere. So in the southern hemisphere, it goes to the left, or the Coriolis goes to the left, so it kind of offsets the gyroscopic drift. But you got other things like gravity drop. So if you look at the target, I drew a little target here. There's a lot of different things that can go into making your shot off target. So you got basically two components, a vertical and a horizontal. So vertically, there's a couple things vertically. Certainly the weight and gravity drop is a big thing. So this causes a big effect. So you really have to factor in for the gravity drop. And then the Otvos effect, which is the vertical component of the Coriolis, is also important, when you're doing like over 1,000 yards at long range. So that deflects it. I don't want to get too much in the Otvos effect because it's kind of complex, because not only do you have to factor for latitude, you got to factor for the direction, your azimuthal angle too. So with the Otvos effect, you have to not only know your latitude, but you got to know exactly what direction you're shooting. Where with the horizontal deflection of Coriolis, because it's basically just a plane, it doesn't matter what direction you're shooting. It's the same. It's always to the right by the same amount based on your latitude. So it doesn't matter what direction you're shooting for the horizontal deflection of Coriolis, but for the vertical, you do need to know. So it's a little more complicated with the calculation, but I don't want to talk about that too much, but just know that is a factor. Now, there's other things too, like with the aerodynamics of the bullet. Some of those things are going to be like the drag force, which I did put here, the weight of the bullet, the cross-sectional surface area going into the wind. That's all very important. So this isn't even a complete list. Like if you're shooting uphill, or there's other things that can happen or go on. But the point I want to bring up here is that Coriolis is just one of these many factors, and because it's so subtle, a lot of times long-range ballistic shooters don't need to really factor it in. These little minor changes of, like I said, about 1.5 to 4 inches, depending on your latitude, for about 1,000 yards. It's still, if you got a small target, though, 1.5 inches is significant. So there definitely are times where you need to use Coriolis. And I have a few books here. One is by one of the top teachers of ballistics, Brian Litz. You can look on YouTube for some of his videos. So this book right here has a whole chapter on the Coriolis effect. And it's actually a really good read. I mean, I actually learned about the Coriolis. When you learn from someone that's applying the science, you kind of get deeper insights into what it means. And so this is a very good book on long-range ballistics. Again, a whole chapter on Coriolis, because it is a real thing. It's not imaginary. And this one's pretty good too. This has got a whole section, not a chapter like the other book, but it's got a whole section on the Coriolis effect. And again, I got some really good insights from this one too. So now on my website, dfe.net/Coriolis, I'll put a link below the video. I do have many more links and resources. And I want to thank MC Toon for being a resource for many of these links. And just to kind of go through it quickly here, The Coriolis Force, there's actual software for ballistics, and you can see the Coriolis is one of the settings. They actually make these digital scopes, and you can see, like, this is a pretty advanced one where the Coriolis is right built in here. And the nice thing about these scopes is you can kind of dial in some of these things if you're like in a set location, and it just kind of takes care of these corrections for you. But you absolutely, if you're going to be shooting over 1,000 yards and you got a fixed small target and the wind isn't very significant, you definitely want the Coriolis corrections to be turned on. And there's more software, more examples. Again, all these high-tech ballistics, for Witsit to say that, oh, I've talked to all these people that do ballistics and then none of them use Coriolis, just because it's subtle and just because the people you talk to don't do it, this guy, Brian Litz, he teaches people. He teaches hundreds and hundreds of people. So I would be rather listening to him than someone that just shoots long-range ballistics maybe as a hobby, or even if they're in the military. Maybe they just were never in a situation where they had to shoot a very long range. Again, 1,000 yards, that's 3,000 feet. That's over a half a mile. That's a long ways away. So not many people in the military or in certain applications are going to be shooting that far. So again, just go to dfe.net/Coriolis. I do want to just mention in passing, though, that the Coriolis corrections for artillery, like cannons and different types of long range are now Coriolis corrections become much more important. When you got artillery projectiles that are going a really long distance and spend a lot of time in the air, then you could have a lot of correction. And you can see here some links. And again, my site, dfe.net/Coriolis, you can go to these links and you can see these tables that absolutely correct for Coriolis. So when you got these really long range artillery, now you really got to correct for Coriolis, or you're just going to be off by many feet now, maybe even, who knows, it depends on the distance, but you'll be off by a significant amount. And I got a couple links. There's not just one, but there's multiple. So again, this is just overwhelming evidence that Coriolis is a real thing that has to be factored into both long-range ballistics, like with long-range sniper shots, etc., and with long-range artillery. And just more links here. Just a lot of, this is really interesting. This is not a video on curvature, but here's a paper where the long-range ballistics, in some situations, you actually have to factor for the curvature of the Earth. And this talks about how to do that with long-range ballistics and how the curvature of the Earth sometimes comes into play. Again, so hey, another piece of evidence that we live on a sphere. I like this applied evidence. Okay, so the last thing I want to talk about now is planes. And let's listen to Witsit, because again, his whole misunderstanding about the Earth rotating out from under the plane, you can see that kind of crop up again. So let's hear what he has to say, and then we'll just debunk the heck out of it.
Flies over the Earth, and it does not bank to the left when it's flying from north to south. It doesn't bank over and then accelerate forward to somehow catch up to the Earth spinning underneath it. It just adjusts left and right based on the wind. Now, no autopilot or any manual pilot flights ever have accounted for Coriolis with a consistent update. So they say, oh, well, it's not that much. And the spin of the Earth is accounted for just naturally as you update for the wind. That makes no sense, though. If you're going straight and then the wind moves you over to the right, but the Earth's spinning to the left, as the plane adjusts back to go straight to the point it originally was, it would have to additionally adjust to get to the location that would be catching up with the Earth. So if you flew 5.5 hours without adjusting for Coriolis, you'd be like 3,000 kilometers off of your path. And no globe earther proponent ever addresses this at all. There is no answer.
Okay, well, I'm a globe earther, and I'm going to address it right now. So I'm going to make you eat your words here. And actually, that's not true. Many other globe earthers haven't addressed this. So for him to say that's kind of silly. But you can see he's saying that on like a 5.5 hour journey, somehow we're going to be 3,000 miles back. And I want to go to Walter Bisland. I'm going to put a link below this video, because Walter Bisland, he just does such great stuff. And he's got this whole page on the Coriolis, and you can actually, calculate. And you can see here, what I like about this chart here is not only can you set, let's set it for 250 meters per second, which is about 560 miles an hour, which is the numbers I'm going to show you some of the calculations I did here. So, if you're a plane that's traveling, say, from north to south, if you don't account for Coriolis, you could be off by, tens or even hundreds of miles. But now this is a lot more long distance type of flights. So what I like about this is you can actually look at the plane traveling both from a viewer outside the Earth's non-inertial rotating system or being within the Earth's non-inertial system. And this is what we have to go by here because we live on the Earth and we are a part of this rotating frame of reference of the Earth. So the Coriolis effect is a real thing and planes do have to account for it. What Witsit is getting at is that a lot of these planes are basically taking a set route and the pitch, roll, yaw, the plane is going to correct to stay on course. And usually some of the winds will probably be a stronger force than the Coriolis, but if the Coriolis, if it's a calm day and there's not much wind, you actually can calculate how much Coriolis acceleration, this is what I did right here. This is the equation for Coriolis. So the nice thing about this equation here, it's not that hard, it's just a little bit of algebra. And this is the horizontal component, because the vertical component is all factored in with, as is centrifugal with the lift of the plane. The nice thing about this equation is very simple to use. You just type in the latitude and then the velocity of the plane, and we know the angular velocity of the Earth, and we can calculate the Coriolis acceleration. And I did the numbers, you can see for if you're at the 30th latitude here, this is about relatively close to where I live. Tallahassee is right on the 30th there. You're going to get an acceleration of 0.0182 meters per second squared. Remember I said in one of my last videos how the centrifugal acceleration was 0.03 and that our human limit of perception is right around that area. So this acceleration is so small that it's beyond our ability to detect it. But here's the thing. The Coriolis, unlike the centrifugal, is a velocity-dependent force. So you just can't take a hot air balloon and go straight up and think that you're going to feel Coriolis. You've got to be moving north, south, east, west. You've got to be moving against the rotation of the Earth in a horizontal direction. And then you'll be deflected always to the right in the northern hemisphere, always to the left in the southern hemisphere. But you're going to be deflected more and more and more as you go towards the poles. And you get to the equator, you won't be deflected at all. It's theoretically 0 at the equator, the Coriolis, because the sine of 0 is 0. The sine of 90 is 1. That's why at 90th, at the poles, you got the greatest acceleration. And I actually lived, this is right at Gaylord, Michigan. I actually lived in Gaylord like four years or so, just north of there in Vanderbilt. And we had a little sign, 45th parallel, the 45th latitude. And you can see that the force is, fairly significantly stronger than where I am here in Florida, but still not very much. Now, what's interesting is you can now use another equation. I don't want to get too math heavy here. It's just, to me, this is all a Walter's link, by the way. I just had fun doing the calculations myself. You can calculate the bank angle based on these accelerations. So we know, here's the formula here, and it's basically almost the same formula that we just used. This is the centrifugal acceleration divided by g, the gravitational constant. I'm not going to derive this. You can look on Walter's site if you want to look at the derivation. But essentially, you're just taking the minus arctan, so it's not a very difficult. You can do this with Google Calculator even. And what I did is I calculated the bank angle needed to offset the Coriolis force at these 3 latitudes, which this is like Tallahassee, this is up in northern Michigan, and here 60. The 60th latitude would be way like in Norway or Alaska, Anchorage, Alaska. But look at now, you only have to bank the angle you need the roll that you need to compensate for the Coriolis is you're going to have to do a bank angle of 0.11 to 0.18 if you're going at a typical speed that airplanes go, around 250 meters per second. So that's not too far off with what most planes are going. So this is a very small correction, because this is something a lot of times pilots don't need to focus on so much, because they're just keeping kind of a bearing over a precise ground track. And they just automatically are making corrections. I mean, even in manual pilot mode, you're still just going to go by your location to follow that precise ground track to your destination. So if you got a big gust of wind coming, you have to offset for it. And you absolutely need to offset for the Coriolis. And this is pretty much constant where wind is not. So if you're a pilot going north to south or any or even east to west, you're going to have to still account for it. You need to be banking whether you, and again, 0.11 or 0.15, that's a very small degree of banking. But it does, it does add up. Like I showed you, you could be several hundred miles off course if you're on a long flight. And the interesting thing that Walter points out, as does Wolfie 6020, is that you can calculate, I'm not going to do it here, Walter does on his website, you can calculate the amount of the change in thrust needed to use these bank angles to offset Coriolis, and it comes to like a 0.0002% increase. So this is another reason why a lot of pilots might not know too much about this, because no extra fuel is really needed for that. It's such a small amount of extra thrust needed. But the point is, and I want you to watch Wolfie 6020 here, because he gives you some solid proof that the Coriolis is factored into flights, to every flight. It has to be. So let's listen to his little video here.
Additionally, what you will see here is that there are constant corrections being made to the roll, less than 1 degree, but constant and frequent. And this is how the aircraft continually corrects itself as it's flying along a precise ground track. These constant small roll corrections are how the aircraft compensates for crosswind and the Coriolis effect. It is undeniable, and this flight test data page shows it occurring clearly.
Okay, so that was very good. And an actual pilot, so again, Witsit, these flat earthers, they say they interviewed all these people, and and you never hear any names, or sometimes you do, but hardly ever. They'll just throw out, oh yeah, I interviewed some guys, some snipers, and they don't use Coriolis. I interviewed some pilots, but it's like, that's not proof, guys. I mean, this here is, well, it's evidence. It's incredibly powerful evidence that the Coriolis force is real, and that we have to compensate for it. And we can calculate very precisely and mathematically that this Coriolis force does come from an accelerating, rotating reference frame. And it's a very real force. I kind of wanted to conclude here with just the old wives' tale of how in the northern hemisphere, the toilets will flush clockwise or counterclockwise, and the southern hemisphere clockwise. Now, of course, the reason that's not true in general is that toilets and all these sinks, they're very chaotic. So the water might be flowing strongly in one direction, and it might just wash out the Coriolis. Because remember, Coriolis is an incredibly subtle and weak force, although it is a real force that certainly has powerful effects on larger scales, like with hurricanes. But here now, this website, these guys did a little experiment very carefully in the northern and southern hemisphere, and they did verify that water will drain in the northern hemisphere counterclockwise, southern hemisphere clockwise, if you factor in all the confounding variables that would lead to turbulence and disturbances. And there's actually been some studies on draining water studies, Asher Shapiro, Lloyd Trefethen, where they actually did these similar, more rigorous than what these guys did. But so there is some truth to that. It's just that we can't detect it because our typical sinks and toilets and bathtubs, they just have too much chaotic noise going on, and you're not going to have the right conditions to remove the confounding variables to really see this true Coriolis. But if you're very careful, you could design an experiment, as these guys did, to see this Coriolis effect in like a large pool here. Oh, this is not even that large. I mean, again, if you watch the video, I'll put a link below, they took a lot of care into it. So Coriolis is a real force within our non-inertial rotating reference frame. And we need to factor it in to ballistics, to flights, and it's a big part of weather. And there's a lot of other applications beyond what I just said, but they typically have to do with very long range type of things where you have something that's detached from the Earth, where you have a projectile of one form or another that's airborne for a fairly long period of time. Then the Coriolis forces come into play. So this is fun. Thanks for watching this video. We have a few more, a really good one coming next on spin and rotation. And we're going to expose Witsit again on that one. Really good stuff. But I hope you enjoyed this video, and please do like this video and leave some comments. I'm always learning a lot of things from you guys, so I enjoy your comments. And do subscribe to my channel. I've got many more coming. All right, well, have a good night.